Everyone, and welcome to today's Deputy webinar. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians, the various lands on which we work today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people participating in this session. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of First Nations peoples in their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. Now, before we get into the heart of the session, I have a few quick housekeeping items to help you settle in. First one, yes, today's session is being recorded. You will receive a link to the recordings and a copy of the slide deck in your inbox after the session. We have a lot of groundwork to cover, so I encourage you to silence your phones and close those extra browser tabs so you can focus on the compliance roadmap. Please pop your questions into the chat box as they come to mind. We have a session at the end for Q&A, and we'll get to those as many questions as we can in that session at the end. A quick note on today's content. So change slide, please. Sorry, the disclaimer, Tegan. Thank you, that's the one. The all-important one that we have to share. Apologies, guys. You'll see this disclaimer on your screen now. Now, while we are all very passionate about sharing our years of experience, please remember that the information we're sharing today is for general educational purposes. It doesn't constitute legal, tax, or professional payroll advice. Because every business is unique, I always recommend consulting with your own qualified advisor or legal counsel regarding your specific compliance obligations before you make any business decisions, okay? Legal disclaimer out of the way. Now, for 35 years across finance, payroll and HR, I've navigated everything from the grid of hospitality and mining to complexities of the non-for-profit sector. I've seen a lot of disruptions, but Payday Super really is different. It's a systemic shift that requires a marriage of bulletproof compliance and seamless technology. At Deputy, we know that staying ahead of legislative change isn't just about software, it's about having the right expertise. So my mission today is to transform the complex jargon into clear, actionable language that you can use to drive your business forward. To help me to do that, I brought together two specialists to unpack this from both the technical and the tactical sides. So joining our panel is Riley James, the co-founder and CEO of Super API. Riley is a key partner in the Deputy tech ecosystem, and he's building the tools like super stapling that help Deputy deliver a seamless Payday Super experience. So Riley, thank you so much for being here today.
No problem.
I'm also joined by Maria Nicolatatos. I hope I really said that right. Senior Compliance Consultant at the Australian Payroll Association. Now, Maria has 20 years of hands-on payroll leadership at companies like Hollard Insurance and Datacom. Maria is here to provide that critical tactical lens on how we maintain integrity during this transition. So welcome, Maria. We're very happy to have you on board.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, so now let's dive in and let's firstly cut through the noise. We have roughly 80 business days left before the biggest change to superannuation in our lifetime hits. So currently, around 80% of Aussie businesses are already frustrated with super clearing, mostly because of the manual disconnected process we've all been forced to use. So Payday Super is going to compound those frustrations, sorry guys. We're looking at a possible 13 times increase in operational frequency for employers who currently use a quarterly regime. The ATO isn't just expecting more work, they're estimating an increase of 25 times more errors and returns that they currently see. And this is because of the sheer volume that they're going to be receiving. So if you're still using manual standalone systems with SAF file exports, manual bank uploads, you're simply not going to be able to keep up. The good news though, you're in this room. This means you are already on the front foot, and we're moving to a world where super must be calculated, funded and received by the fund within 7 business days. So to keep your sanity, you're going to need to transition off the ATO Small Business Clearinghouse if you're using it well before 30th of June 2026 when it shuts down. And even if you're not using the ATO Clearinghouse, you may also want to look towards embedded automated clearing that moves the manual handoffs. So Maria, with the small business consultation, I wish they consulted, the Small Business Superannuation Clearinghouse closing on 1st of July, What are the immediate administrative and cost considerations for shift-based businesses currently using this free service?
Yeah, it is a free service and it is closing. You will not be able to access it after the 11:59 p.m. I'm not going to write it here, p.m. on the 30th of June. So, first and foremost, if you are using it, please do what the ATO tells you. Grab your data out of there, grab your records. You have record keeping obligations under the Fair Work regulations, and you need to keep these records to be able to show in the event that there is some sort of inquiry into the super. But what you need to consider now, you've gone from a free service to something that could impact your cash flow. Maybe, maybe not. Are you going to look for another service? Does it come with your DSP? Does your digital service provider offer that service? Is it a standalone clearinghouse? Are you getting it through your superannuation fund? They're the sort of things you need to consider and factor into your cash flow in the event that it will impact and you will have to pay for that service. Again, speak to your software provider. They will have recommendations and they will have obviously their own clearinghouse if they offer that service. So speak to your software provider and determine, is this going to cost me any more money? Is Payday Super going to cost me more money?
Yeah, definitely a good call. And Riley, why the 7-day rule is a new standard? Like, how does the 20-day buffer specifically protect employers when they're onboarding new hires or when they're dealing with fund-initiated changes?
Yeah, so the first thing to understand about these rules is that it's all about business days, not calendar days. And it's the days from when this employee has been paid. And if you don't get your super payments in within these windows, that's when you're going to have to submit supercharge guarantees, which comes with additional penalties and additional reporting requirements. So if you can get within that window, you can save yourself some headaches. Now, the 7-day rule is the standard, but the ATO has given a buffer for a new employee or specific circumstances where a fund has merged or the details you have changed because of something the fund has done. In those situations, you get 20 business days to get that first payment in. Now, it sounds like a long time, but the reality is that that time will quickly get eaten up through the standard process. So you're probably not going to find out this payment has bounced until the first payday for that new employee. And then you're already going to be 4 or 5 days into that cycle when that bounces back. So then you really only have 15 days. What you have to do next is start collecting a new super choice from that employee. So that might involve giving them a super choice form. You probably want to have some sort of time limit with that to make sure they know they need to get this in ASAP. Otherwise, you're going to have to take additional steps. Those additional steps are super stapling and defaulting. And we're going to talk a bit more about that later on in this conversation. But yeah, you also got to think about when you actually make that payment. So are you going to do an out-of-band payment to get that employee paid in terms of their super, or are you going to wait till your next payday? Again, that's going to depend on what your payment cycles and payday cycles look like. So there's a few things to think about to make sure that you can get within those windows, even though you get that extension for a new employee.
Yeah, that's terrific information. Thanks, Riley. Maria, we've gone lights out. For our businesses that are on the front foot and really want to get ahead of things, if they want to start paying on payday now, what should they wait for regarding the new reporting requirements?
Well, the new reporting requirements, I mean, they're effective the 1st of July, but can you transition further? Yeah, but again, you'll have to speak to your DSP because there are a lot of implications with the legislation. There's different mapping for what used to be called OTEs, now called qualifying earnings. There's different reporting parameters. So again, we don't, based on, and I'm sorry if anyone from the ATO is in there, but there has been a bit of a lag between the legislation and the specifications that the DSPs require. So if you have got a DSP that has a crystal ball and has managed to implement these specifications before receiving them, wow, don't change your service provider. But in all fairness, speak to your service provider to see what have they got in their system. There's things that you need to report and there's things that you can't report. How is your system going to accommodate this? You need, by all means, try it and move to a more frequent paying your super more frequently. But as for the specifications, please reach out to your DSP because they're the only ones that can help you right now to meet your obligations.
Yeah, so I think the message is there. We can't actually report super until the 1st of July. We can't report the new changes to super, but if your system allows you to pay super on payday now, which is not payday super, it's just paying your super on payday, certainly have a look at moving to that transition so you can get used to that function of actually doing it per pay run. Yeah. Thank you very much. All right, so now let's talk about, sorry, next slide, Tegan, thank you. Now let's talk about the new earnings base. And next slide. We're moving from OTE to qualifying earnings. The shift from ordinary time earnings, your OTE, to qualifying earnings, QE, it's about transparency to the ATO. So while superannuation liability, it is an existing reporting element in single touch payroll right now, so single touch payroll STP. The new rules make reporting both qualifying earnings and superannuation liability mandatory. So QE is going to be used by the ATO to calculate the mandatory 12% superannuation guarantee, and the super liability will represent what you actually pay through the clearinghouse. So the other technical shift for your payroll team is the annual maximum contribution base, or MCB. In the old world, we know we look at the maximum contribution base as a quarterly cap, but in the new Payday Super world, it's actually going to be a single annual cap per employer. So once your employee hits that QE limit for the financial year, then this is likely to be around the $250,000 mark, your superannuation guarantee requirement stops. So if your system isn't tracking this as an annual total, you're going to overcalculate and create a massive manual reconciliation headache. So this is why real-time processing, it's no longer optional. Your software needs to report QE and total super owed each pay run via STP. And if you aren't capturing and validating employee fund details at the point of digital onboarding, you're already behind that 7-day clock. So let's talk about the qualifying earnings reporting bucket, Maria. How does a manager handle the situation where they pay 15% super, but as we know, the mandated SG and qualifying earnings is 12%?
Yeah. So if you try and think of it like this way, the ATO takes your STP report with all the data, and you've got gross, you've got allowances, you've got paid leave, and you've got a column called qualifying earnings. Now, the ATO wants to pretty much see that all your components, qualifying earnings is actually correct, and then they look at the L and make sure that that's at least 12% of your qualifying earnings. So if you're reporting qualifying earnings that don't have a liability, you're going to overstate your earnings, and the ATO is going to say you haven't paid enough super. Conversely, if you've got a company that has 15% superannuation, what do you report in your L? You can report the whole 15%, or you can split it and have a 3% component, and you can have a 12% component and just report your L. The ATO doesn't care about that. They really want to see that your L is 12%, at least 12% of your QE. Conversely, if you've got someone that has maybe has qualifying earnings over the 250,000 mark, you should not be reporting those qualifying earnings. Again, that's probably something you need to think about. Do I need to use a different pay code? Will my system automatically stop reporting this? This is the sort of stuff you need to think about when you are configuring your system.
Yeah, they're really good calls out, especially that going over the maximum contribution base. I don't think a lot of people have actually thought of that in what they're looking at setting up in their systems. Yeah, good call. Riley, why is establishing a digital relationship between employer and employee so essential for a clean and automated stapling request under these new laws?
Yeah, thanks, Simone. This is the real chicken and egg problem that exists with super stapling. It makes it somewhat difficult to use in practice. But once you know why, you can start to plan around it. So before a stapling request will be successful, there needs to be a link between the employee and the employer on the ATO's side. So there are a couple of ways that link can be created. One is through a tax file number declaration submission that actually goes to the ATO. So that could be via your software, though most software doesn't do that anymore. Or it could be via an employee logging into MyGov and completing the tax file number declaration online and submitting that. But again, most employees don't do that. Or it can be submitted via a single touch payroll event. The challenge there is that single touch payroll events don't happen until after payday. So the idea of requesting someone's stapled super fund before payday, which is when you typically need it, doesn't really work with most software because they're only submitting the single touch payroll events. Now, uh, the way that can succeed with this, with digital onboarding, is by using something like Deputy, where the tax file number declaration submission is performed during the onboarding. So that sets up that employee-employer link during the employee's onboarding and means that stapling can happen at any point after that, which can be before payday. And that enables you to retrieve the stapled super fund details if you need, when you need, before payday, and get your super contributions in, even for employees that don't give you any details or give you some incorrect details.
It's an absolutely beautiful process, isn't it? And I'm very proud to be part of that. So yeah, definitely well done, Riley, with what you've done with that. Back to you, Maria. The shift from quarterly maximum contribution base to an annual one it's a significant one for salary packaged employees, isn't it? So how should payroll teams adjust their calculations for high earners who hit that cap mid-year?
Yeah, again, you'll probably have to look at your existing processes because there is this concept that whether it's packaged or whether it's, paying quarterly, many employers tend to fix because we were on a quarterly regime and they used to fix the amount of superannuation such that they didn't exceed the quarterly cap so that each pay period the employee received a fixed amount of super because their earnings were greater than what the super was required. So they used to fix it. That's a bit of a problem. You can't be doing that. You shouldn't have been doing that to start with, but you can't be doing it now because the ATO is going to be looking at your STP report each pay period and determining, have you calculated 12% of your QE? There is no quarterly cap. It is a running annual total. And again, you'd have to probably think of the cash flow implications of this because it used to be that you were only limited to superannuation on ordinary time earnings per quarter. Now you're going to have to keep paying it until they reach that maximum contributions base.
Yeah. And I've seen some of those calculations and people trying to wrap their head around how they'll actually do that, particularly for obviously salary packaged employees. So yeah, sit down. It is a bit of math involved. You're going to have to actually work out that overall package now a little bit differently to what you used to. But yeah, definitely just sit down and work out how it actually works for you and how it's going to affect your business if you're doing that rolled up package of salary plus super. Because yes, definitely those calculations are going to need to possibly change from what you've been doing currently. All righty, so the next slide, please. We're going to be talking about the compliance and the new SG in that first year. So we're talking about the cost of getting it wrong. Next slide, please. As I said, the maths has changed with this as well. So your superannuation guarantee charge, the maths on that one, it has changed and fortunately it isn't in your favour. So under the new regime, even a minor delay triggers a superannuation guarantee charge, or as we know, SGC. And SGC is superannuation. I'm just going to do a huge correction point here. SGC is superannuation guarantee charge. SG is super guarantee. So I see so many people saying SGC for normal superannuation guarantee. The C is for charge. It's not for contribution. That's just me on my soapbox. But yes, that superannuation guarantee charge could be as much as 60% higher than what we see today. So if you wait for the ATO to assess you, that penalty can actually skyrocket to more than double what your original shortfall was. There is some good news. The new deductibility is that the core SGC component, your shortfall and your notional earnings, they are now tax deductible where they weren't. However, the general interest charge and any late payment penalties applied after an assessment, they're not deductible. Okay, so make sure you know that one. So the risk of non-integrated systems, is repeated penalties every single payday. Okay, so again, I'll repeat that. The risk of non-integrated systems is repeated penalties every single payday. The only way to win is to automate your payments and keep your employee data clean from the start. Now, the good news is that the ATO acknowledges the difficulty of this change. So from 1st of July 2026, they are taking a risk-based compliance framework and they will prioritise support over penalties for employers showing genuine effort. So this approach establishes a 12-month, it's a low-risk zone where the ATO will generally not investigate the transparent employers who maintain strong internal controls and promptly fix those errors. So their focus is on adoption and accuracy, but however, high-risk behaviour such as systemic non-payment, this will trigger investigation and the non-deductible superannuation guarantee charge. So Maria, the 60% uplift, it is a really, really heavy hitter. How does the cascading voluntary disclosure timeline work to bring that penalty down if an employer self-reports an error?
Yeah, so what the ATO will do is, have you been naughty? Have I issued you an assessment once? If I have, we're going to start at 60%. You're not going to get a buffer there. But if I haven't, right, if I haven't issued you an assessment in the last 24 months, I'm going to give you a 20% discount. So your 60% admin fee has already dropped 20% to 40. And then there's the second part to it. Did you voluntarily disclose any shortfalls that you may have made? Because there's this thing called this concept of the voluntary disclosure statement. Now, unlike the superannuation charge statement that we currently complete in the event that we haven't met our obligations, bye-bye, there's none of that. The ATO will assess you. They will raise the assessment looking at your SDP, looking at your contributions, looking at what the funds reported and their data matching, right? So if you've made a boo-boo and you voluntarily disclose, again, they say, hey, if you disclose within 30 days of QE day that you made a boo-boo, I'm going to drop your 60% uplift even more. So let's say you didn't get an assessment. So you started with 60, it's now down to 40. Then you've got a voluntary disclosure within the first 30 days of you missing that payment or not meeting your obligations. They're going to reduce that admin component by another 40%. So no admin uplift for you. But if you've been naughty and you've had an assessment, no initial 20% drop. You're going to stay at 60%. And then depending on when you lodge your voluntary disclosure statement, so if it's within 30 days, 60 days, 120, the rate will drop further. So if you do it within 30 days and you haven't had an assessment, bye-bye uplift, no uplift for you. But if you do it within 60 days, that uplift drop of 40% will now only be 35, and so forth and so forth. So the longer you take to voluntarily disclose, and if you're already been naughty and had an assessment, you're not going to get too much of a reprieve from that 60% uplift. But if you have been meeting your obligations and you voluntarily disclose, the ATO says, yeah, we'll reduce that potentially to zero for you.
That's good to know. And for those of you on the call today too, that I know we have all struggled with the challenge of that superannuation guarantee charge statement that is a 1997, I believe, Excel spreadsheet from memory, and just how complex and difficult that is to actually fill out and do. The voluntary disclosure statement, it hasn't been finalised yet. The ATO is actually working with working groups. I am actually part of that working group that is creating the voluntary disclosure statement. It will hopefully be available in software, maybe not this year. So there probably will be what they call a wholesale version of the form that the ATO will provide for the first year. But of course, as we know, they've got that 12-month period that they're going to be soft on us anyway. But yes, there will be a new form. You have some of the best minds in the room actually working on creating that form and making sure it is a lot better of a process than we are currently faced with. So to keep an eye out for what's happening with that voluntary disclosure statement as well. So, Anne-Maria, with exceptional circumstances, the ATO is talking about exceptional circumstances that they will accept a 20-day extension. What are those things that are considered exceptional circumstances that will give that 20-day extension to make on-time contributions?
Yeah, so the exceptional circumstances. Oh,
it's a tongue tire, isn't it?
That thing that Simone just said, right?
Exceptional circumstances.
Massive IT outages, your Optus dropout line, that sort of stuff. Your floods, your tornadoes, whatever we get, the cyclones, the hurricanes, the whole lot. Those sort of issues that are going to prevent an employer meeting their obligations. The fact that you've got 3 people in payroll, 2 are off sick and one's holidaying in Canada and you could not meet your obligations, that's not an exceptional circumstance, unfortunately. But the way they do work it, just to let you know, that 20 days, let's say you pay weekly. So you paid on the 8th of July. Great day, my birthday. You paid on the 8th of July. Those contributions are due within 7 days following QE day. But let's say we had a massive outage. What the ATO will issue is something like a certificate of coverage for a period of 20 business days. And what that does, it says, hey, you know that QE day, the 8th, don't worry about paying that on the 18th, and I've just made up that that's 7 business days away. You've got 20 business days. And what that certificate also does is cover your next QE day. So you've paid on the 8th, you've paid on the 15th. That certificate covers all those pay periods up until that date on the certificate where you have an extension, those 20 business days. So it's not just for that one pay run, it's for any pay runs that have QE days falling in that 20-day period where superannuation contributions are due.
Oh, that's great news. That's excellent. I do hope we don't have hurricanes and that sort of thing, though, because, yeah, that's a bit upsetting. But, yeah, I'm sad that they won't let me have an extension because I have to take my dog to the vet. All right. Now, please remember, keep popping your questions into the chat. So we've got those to have a look at the end of the session, and we answer anything. You might have some questions from what we've already gone through. So don't forget to keep popping those questions into that chat. Now, to close out, so next slide, please. We're going to talk about the infrastructure and the automation, and particularly things like the new payments platform. So let's look at the multiple super clearing options available, because they are certainly not created equal, especially when it comes to efficiency, compliance, and your time. So firstly, let's look at the manual standalone options. These are the traditional highly administrative methods. They often involve generating a superannuation file from your payroll system, logging into a separate clearinghouse portal, manually uploading that file, and then separately logging into your bank to approve and make the payment. Now, we all know that these are very, very slow, disconnected systems, and they do create a significant compliance risk. They increase the chance of human error and demand considerable time and investment from your payroll team each pay cycle. Essentially, what you're doing is you're actually managing 2 separate processes in one task. Another system that we've got is that semi-integrated tools. Now, this represents a slight step up, but while the generation of the super data might still occur in your payroll system, the actual approval and payment steps are linked but still separated. The system might push the data to the bank's payroll payment platform. However, you're still approval hopping into your bank. So this means that you're pulled out of your core payroll environment to complete the critical final steps. The integration is partial, leading to fragmented visibility and often requiring separate sign-ins and reconciliation steps across different platforms. Now, there is a North Star option, fully embedded automation. This is the gold standard for modern payroll and super management. In this model, the superannuation data, the payment initiation, and the final clearing are all handled seamlessly within a single, unified payroll platform. This process moves from calculation to payment with minimal manual intervention, and it's what we all want, isn't it? So when super is processed inside your payroll, the process is automated, audit trails are immediate and centralised, and there's no need for data exports, re-uploads, or approval hopping across different systems, or changing columns and all that sort of thing. This delivers the maximum efficiency and dramatically reduces the time spent on superannuation processing. Gold star system. So from the 1st of July 2026, you will also need to use what's called the ATO Member Verification Request. So Member Verification Request, MVR. This is a system that is currently being built by the ATO. So again, as Marie hinted on, something that we don't actually have access to as yet, but you're going to hear a lot about it. So this is what's being built to validate the fund details before you pay them. It's member details, goes to the fund straight away in that sign up. They're verified by the fund and says, yes, we will accept these contributions for this employee based on all the information that you've given us. And this is going to be your safety net because it prevents that reject and the refund loop that will otherwise land you possibly in a late payment fine. So really looking forward to this ATO member verification request. And I think this is something that is going to be a huge positive coming out of Payday Super, that we're going to have less of those rejects when we're actually using that ATO verification request. Now, to accelerate the payment of contributions to super funds, the payments infrastructure is also transitioning to the new payments platform, or NPP. Again, this is something if you haven't heard about yet, you're going to hear a lot about it, and it's for near real-time batch processing, and the goal is near real-time payments, but it still is a work in process. So everything else, like what's happening with Payday Super, there are things being built. We're almost there with most of it, but there are still some hiccups that we're trying to get over, and the big batch processing is one of those things that we're still looking at with NPP. A lot of you, if you don't really understand new payments platform, just think of your Pay2 Now and your Pay ID. They're parts of that new payments platform as well. So what you need to be doing is you need to be asking your software providers today if they are going to be ready for the new payments platform for the 1st of July cutover, because that's going to obviously ease the way that you process things. If you're not doing your BEX file uploads and downloads, having that new payments platform access and that instant payment, how much time is that going to cut out for you? So there's also a new requirement for super funds to allocate or return money within 3 business days. Now, this is a significant victory for payroll processors. You are all no doubt aware and jumping up and down for joy right now. So yes, from the 20-day current, which we know that they don't necessarily stick to, the 20 business days is now going to actually move to 3 business days. So this is a significant change for us, and it will drastically shorten the time it takes for employers to be notified of a failed payment. There will be new error messages as well, clearer, easier to understand error messages coming through from the funds when there is a rejection. So you should be able to action those rejections quickly to try and meet that 7-day deadline as well. Riley, let's talk about that reject and refund cycle. How does real-time fund validation using MBR and other systems prevent an employer from accidentally missing the 7-day deadline?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, yeah, with most of this Payday Super, change, a lot of the focus has been on these payments and faster payments, and that's going to solve the problem or give me more time to resolve it. And that's partially true, definitely a part of the solution. But the reality is, if you've got incorrect super details, like if you had incorrect bank details, it doesn't matter how fast that payment goes, it's going to go to the wrong place or it's going to bounce back. And so you're back to square one. So yes, the real challenge is, how do you validate all those details ahead of payday so that when you make the payments, they're going to go through the reconciliation process, which now thankfully only takes 3 days with the super fund. It's going to match. It's not going to get refunded. So MBR is one of the tools that's been added by the ATO, by the super industry, to enable this verification to happen ahead of payday. Now, you're going to start hearing a lot about it because it's coming into the 1st of July. But the reality is this system is still under development and is only going to become available for testing with DSPs in April. So then we will start implementing it, and by the 1st of July, we'll definitely have it in, and I'm sure other providers will as well. So it's not something you as an employer can directly use. It has to come through your software. Your software providers will build out and make sure this is available for you. But it is, yes, the critical tool for validating those super details that you have received from your employee ahead of Payday Super or ahead of the payday. But it is only one tool. So, no tool is going to solve all problems in all situations. That's why super stapling and defaulting are still part of that package of tools that you can use if the details are incorrect and you need to find some alternative super details for this employee so that you can make sure you meet your obligations, which is to get a payment to that employee for their super before you run into the 7 or 20-day rule.
And I've seen in Super API that you actually use different systems, and I know that there was a lot of discussion in that in the legislation too about not limiting the selection validating funds and that sort of thing to pay to super stapling, because there are other systems that I know you use now that actually do help validate funds and give a bit of insight to payroll employers that yes, this detail of this employee is correct. So yeah, I certainly see that there are other systems and operating processes that are available. And again, this is where we have those discussions with ATO, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we take a very layered approach. You never know when one system's going to be down or the details you have are going to get validated against one and not another. We take the approach of sort of a depth in defense. We will send those details, get them validated as many times as possible, which only increases the confidence we have that, yes, this is 100% correct and it's going to go through. And yes, we use the member validation requests. We use super stapling. We will register them as a default at the last hurdle, but otherwise we also have direct integrations with super funds. So that we're directly looking up a member's details with the super fund. And all of that then enables us to create an experience where the employee can immediately see these are the super funds I already have. That's usually what they're looking for. Then they can just select a fund they already have. And you as the employer know you're getting those details validated by an external source, not just something that the employee has punched in, which is what typically brings the errors and then the higher error rates when payments and contributions get made.
Yeah, definitely. And abandonment of employment, I know, causes a lot of chaos in businesses. I've heard that stapling intends to resolve that. How's that going to be achieved?
Yeah, so this is one of the more typical cases where an employee has not provided you a super choice or they've dropped out of the super choice process before the first payday. Typically, they'll always get you their bank details, but maybe super is one thing that they'll forget. So you ultimately need somewhere to pay that super. So in the event that an employee doesn't provide you super choice details, we will perform a super stapling request, which is the first step in that abandonment process. We can do that again because we've already submitted the tax file number declaration just ahead of that, which enables that super stapling request to be made ahead of payday rather than after. Stapling will either come back and say, yes, we found this employee, they're linked to you as an employer, here's their stapled super fund details, and then you can use that to make a contribution. Happy days.
Mm-hmm.
Or it'll come back and say, no, this employee is not linked with you yet. Or it'll say, this employee doesn't actually have a super fund. You can default them with your employer default fund.
Right. Yeah.
If it comes back with that default option, we will then automatically perform that employer default registration. Again, it happens before payday. That process can take up to 3 to 5 days to fully reconcile and get that member set up. When that does come back, that's what goes into payroll. So ultimately what that results in is even though the employee didn't give you their super choice, you've still got 2 opportunities to get super details that you can now pay to, and that will meet your obligations under the 7 or 20-day rule. And if you do all of that processing ahead of payday, then all you're worrying about on payday is I'm going to make this contribution, I'm going to make this payment, and you've got a much higher confidence that that payment is going to go through and it's going to reconcile and it's not going to bounce back. And that should save a lot of time.
Yeah, that's a really important part of the process, isn't it? To make sure that you're meeting those obligations on time. All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground today. So next slide, thanks. We've covered a lot of ground today, and if your head is spinning, don't worry. That's exactly why you're here. So you're already on the front foot because you're looking at these 2026 hurdles now, rather than waiting till the 30th of June. So we're going to move over to our Q&A session now, and we have a stack of questions coming in. So we'll get through as many as possible to make sure you walk away feeling clear and confident. And I will find a way to actually add any of those answers to the questions we don't get to today, whether we put that on the post on when we post up the video or somewhere else. We'll make sure we get to that. But we've got a couple of questions that come in offline, and I'll ask this one to you first, Maria. What happens to the maximum contribution base if an employee has 2 different employers?
They get a lot of super. No. In order to avoid exceeding their concessional cap, which I can't talk about because I don't have a financial advisor's license, but if they say to themselves, I don't want to go over X amount of super this year, what they can do is if they've got 2 employers and they're receiving a lot of income, and they write to the ATO and they request to opt out of superannuation from one of these employers. So they don't have to have superannuation from both employers. And let's say I'm one of the employers that receives a document from the ATO saying you don't need to pay any more super, and we'll say Simone's a high income earner. You don't need to pay any more super for her. What I can continue to do, as far as I know, is report those QE with a zero liability. And you're probably thinking to yourself, the ATO is going to look at your QE and your zero liability. Apparently, they have some sort of, I don't know,
crystal ball tracking system, Big Brother.
will be able to look up that employee, look at the FN, look at the date of birth, match this data and say, yeah, Simone's got an opt-out certificate. No, that's all right. Maria's STPs looks fine.
Yeah, cool. That's excellent. That's good news. Hope that answers the question for whoever asked for that one online. Okay, I'll answer this one. If I pay my employees weekly, but only process super once a fortnight, am I in breach? So look, I've come to understand that the trigger is payday, or in ATO speak, it's actually called qualifying earnings day. So you really should get familiar with the exceptional ATO guidance on their website, or join an association like APA for guidance. Now, ATO have actually dropped a whole lot of new material on Friday. So there's a whole lot of new stuff actually on their website now. They have actually this year, I must give them kudos. They've put a lot of good material together in explanations for employers. There's good visuals, good videos, good webinars and everything else. Obviously join our webinars and our materials that we're actually doing a bit of an unpacking of that detail, but definitely get familiar with the ATO's Payday Super website, all the different pages, and go through that. There's always a lot of content with the ATO, but definitely I highly recommend logging in, getting those details. And as I say, where you need help, you've got associations like the Australian Payroll Association and Maria to assist you as well. So highly recommend reaching out to them as well. All right, Riley, here's one for you. Is the 3-day fund allocation rule business days or calendar days?
That would be business days.
Well, that's it. That's a nice simple one, isn't it? All right, let's go to the chat and I'll have a look through here and see what we can actually jump in with. I can see the first one from Adam, and I'll answer this one for you. I'm going to throw a couple to you as well, Maria. The Payday Super coming in, how will this affect those employees who are in defined benefit funds? The latest regulations that the ATO dropped on Friday actually do talk in detail about defined benefit funds, so I would recommend you actually read those. No one on this call is going to be able to give you that advice pretty much because it is financial advice. But yeah, those details were clearly defined in the regs that dropped on Friday. I'll try and see, Tegan, if we can actually pop a link to those regs in whatever materials we're sending out to the attendees today, because that was actually a good one. There's plenty of detail in those regs about what is qualifying earnings, what isn't qualifying earnings, and they do talk about defined benefit funds. Okay, so the next one I'm going to throw to you, Maria. We pay under 18s who only get SG if they work over 30 hours a week. Would any hours worked under 30 hours per week need to be entered with a separate non-QE code? And then if they work 30 hours, use a QE pay code. This was my favourite question hitting up the ATO through the whole process.
Yeah, I think they're still struggling to define what a week is, but let's get over it. That's a true story. That's why it's funny. So my understanding is potentially yes. So if you're using, let's say, 0-1 for normal hours, you might have a 0-1-8 for normal hours that don't attract superannuation. That's my understanding. What your system does and how whiz bang it is, that's a different story. So your system may be able to do this, but as far as we know, as far as I'm aware, you're not to be reporting those payments that relate to less than 30 hours a week as qualifying earnings for an under 18-year-old. But if anyone has any other information, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that it's been a challenging one to get the definition, but I think we sort of finally kind of have it. But as you say, we still don't know what a week relates to, so that's always a good one. Go, Riley.
I was just going to jump in on this, just around this under 30 hours and 18-year-olds rule. just some information about how we manage it within the onboarding process. So there's sort of this balance between, for under 18s, do you want to put a super choice in front of them when they're unlikely to receive actual contributions? And, younger employees, they're just trying to start their jobs. They don't always have a great understanding of what super is or what they're being asked to do. So we've made that a skippable process for under 18s. So they get some clear information about why super would be applicable to them and why it might not, and what would happen if it was applicable and they hadn't provided a super choice, which is that stapling and then defaulting process. But that's made very clear to them through the deputy onboarding, and they can choose to either skip the process by acknowledging what will happen, or they can decide, no, I do want to make a super choice. It's important to me, and then they can complete that process. But in either case, you're going to get super details that you'll be able to do something with if and when you do need to make a contribution for that employee.
Yeah, that's really good information, Riley. Thank you. So one we've got here, can I please clarify, and I think this is really good to clarify in this forum. Can I please clarify whether, and Maria, I'm going to throw this one to you. Can I please clarify whether the 7-day period is calculated from the official payroll pay date, or whether it is sufficient that the employee receive their super payment in their super account within that time frame? For example, if payroll is finalised late in the day, around 5 p.m, can the super payment be made, prepared and submitted the next day? I think that's been causing a lot of people confusion.
Yeah, I think the way it's worded is there's a lot of material out there that says you must pay super on the same day that you pay your employee QE. No, the law is 7 days from QE day, the superannuation fund must receive the contributions and be able to allocate them. So if you do it the following morning and it gets there using, your fast payment platform and all these new whiz-bang methods.
Technology systems, yeah.
I'm a bit IT challenged, but all these new technology to achieve your compliance. The law is you're paying an employee on QE day, 7 business days after QE day, the fund has to have that money and be able to allocate it to the employee's account. So can you do it the next day? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. This is the complexity of legislation, and this is where I think when you're reading legislation, it's really hard because it's always they'll use a term and then it relates to another part of legislation or another part of the act here and another part of the act there and this part of the act there, and you try and make it legible, and this is where it gets confusing. So yeah, the legislation, you must pay super on payday. However, the second part of the legislation is, and it must be received by the fund within that 7 days. So yeah, definitely exactly as you said, Maria. Yeah.
Yeah, just those 7 days. That's not necessarily always 7 business days. You've got public holidays in there, tack a day on if it relates to whole state or to the whole nation. So you say 7 business days, but there are exceptions, like Riley said about the 20-day new employee, the 20-day rule for exceptional circumstances. But there's also those public holidays in there. So if you've got a state or a federal or nationwide public holiday, that extends your business days, your regional show days and stuff. No.
Yeah. And this is another good one to follow on with that. Where super is returned to the employer, does the 7 days start again, or are we required to repay within the original 7 days? Riley, are you right to answer that one? Do you want Maria to answer that one, or do you want me to answer that one?
My understanding is that it does not reset any of your timeframes. So whether it's 7 or 20 days, depending on the employee, if you get a bounce back, you need to make those payments as quickly as possible to try and stay within that, or you will face SG charge and additional reporting requirements.
Yeah, I think the only good point to that is, okay, so it's bounced back. If you've got the wrong details, if the employee's provided the wrong details, then you're going to be under that 20-day rule because you're going to be getting a new fund from them. So yeah, so that's probably the only thing. So it's going to be at least, but from that 1 day, you're only going to have 7 days or 20 days. That's it. Yeah. I like this one. I want to answer this one. What is the most percentage an employer can offer the employees? Can I come and work for you? Anything. There's no maximum percentage. And Maria, correct me if I'm wrong here. There's no maximum percentage that I believe that an employer can pay.
You're right. There isn't. If your employer wants to pay 50% super,
Where do I sign up?
Wayne won't get to enjoy it because you'll have passed by that time. But if your employer does want to pay in excess of what's required, that charge, what Simone was talking about, superannuation guarantee charge, that charge percentage is currently 12%. So if you want to pay more than that, go ahead. Don't be paying less.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I did see one here about contractors. They don't get paid payroll, but we pay the super. I gather that you're asking there, do you need to still pay, do you still need to report them through Payday Super? So in other words, reporting them through their qualifying earnings and super liability. Maria?
You can, if you want to. You can report them through STP, but you don't have to. So if you're paying your contractors through the payroll, obviously it's going to be a lot simpler. And there are specific reporting requirements for that as to what you report. You don't report certain things. You report an ABN and a non-employee type, but there's certain parameters that you need to configure your system with if you want to report them through STP. Alternatively, if you're paying through accounts payable, just ensure that data, you've got a workflow somewhere in your system where someone in accounts payable might be sitting at the other end of the country, has paid a contractor. That information needs to get to payroll so they can make the contribution within the 7 business days.
Yeah, and they've still got to report the qualifying earnings. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. And they need to be paid on payday now. They are part of the payday super regulations. Yep. But yeah, again, good one for you to jump onto the ATO website and check all those details and make sure you understand exactly what those contractor requirements are. And as Maria said, speak to your DSP and see if they manage that process, because I know contractors has always been a voluntary uplifting software, voluntarily reported through STP. This change is sort of changing that scope a little bit, so definitely speak to your provider and see if they can manage the superannuation, the contractors through the payroll. Okay, we've got 8 minutes left, so let's see, we'll do a couple more questions. Can you future date, I like this one, can you future date the super file similar to bank file if you're going on holidays? Thanks. I don't know who would know that one. Riley, do you know that one? I can probably answer it if you don't know that one.
No, you can answer that one.
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? I don't know. I think you're going to have to actually check with your super fund, your clearinghouse, your software. So whatever the part of your process is that does that superannuation contribution file, they're going to be the one that's going to allow you to predate it or not. So that's going to be your point of resistance. If the actual fund doesn't allow you to do it or the software doesn't allow you to do it, that would be the first place I would be questioning. I can't see, because I can see where you're going here. You're thinking about, okay, I'm going on holidays, I'm preparing my payroll, ready to hit the button on that day or get someone to hit the button on that day, or the system actually does have it sitting there and it will process it on that day. And I need to make sure that my superannuation contribution goes at the same time with that date on it, or I send it before I go on leave. I think that's what you're actually saying. I send it before I go on leave, and it pays to the fund. So the only two things I would be cautious of there, how is your payroll reporting STP? What date is the payment being made? Because it's that payment date that you're going to need to make sure that superannuation amount goes at the same time. So yes, it in the dreamscape should be available, should be possible, but yeah, you'll just need to check with your DSP and your clearinghouse to see if you can make those two things match up. Okay, next one. Can you see the questions, Maria?
I can see both the chat and the Q&A, and I don't know which one you're reading.
That's right. Okay. Let's pick one. So if your pay period is Tuesday to Monday and you pay on the following Friday, when will we need to be paying super? From the Monday or the Friday?
What day are you making the payment? The day you make a payment of qualifying earnings, that's your QE day. So if you're doing that on Friday, that's your QE day, and you've got 7 business days following QE day to get the money to the fund to be allocated to the employee's account.
Yeah. That's a good one. All right, 6 minutes left to go. Are employers required to apply the super contribution cap when making super payments, or can contributions exceed the cap without employer in breach? That's one for you, Maria.
When you say contributions exceed the cap, I believe you're.
I'd say maximum contribution base. So I'm gonna ask the question in the only way that you can answer it. If the employer is required to apply the maximum contribution cap when making super payments, or can contributions exceed the cap without employer being in breach?
Yeah, the contributions can exceed the concession. The maximum contribution space. No problem. By all means, if that's what your employer wants to pay and that's what you've agreed to, yeah, you can pay more. You can exceed that maximum contribution space if you choose.
Yeah. Riley, you might be able to answer this one. Please throw it back to either of us if you don't want to. It's a good one. I'm giving you a doozy here. Be prepared. What can we do where super has been returned for former employee, stapled info no longer available, employee has been contacted numerous times with no info forthcoming?
Yeah, it's a great
Are you able
question.
to answer that?
Yeah, I can answer it. I'm going to
Yes, go for it.
clarify that it's not legal and administrative advice and all that sort of stuff. So
Yes.
definitely
Caveat.
But I mean, the worst thing you can do is not pay super. So that's sort of the one thing you want to make sure you're avoiding. If super stapling is no longer working because they have officially left and that employee-employer link has been broken, then that is unfortunately no longer an option. If you have some previous stapled details, then you could try and make payment to that option, which is why you would suggest that, to always have some stapled super fund details for an employee. That's always just a good thing to have around in a Payday Super world. But if all of those options have failed, you've contacted multiple times, you haven't got any super choice details, that's where the employer default option is the final resort. Register them with your default, make the payments into there, try and alert to the employee that that's what's happened and that's where their super is so that they can then manage it and deal with it. But at least at that point, you have met your obligations, you've paid super, and yeah, there's really not much else you can do.
And it was a really good question that was thrown around at the voluntary disclosure statement working group. What if you even can't set up a new fund because you haven't got enough details that the fund will accept that person? We didn't really get an answer, but yes, we basically said bring the ATO and say, we can't pay this. What do you want us to do? Because I know that super funds can obviously send unclaimed super to the ATO. So yeah, we feel like that's going to be, I'm not even going to say that's going to be an avenue, but yeah, basically, if you've met all those things exactly as Riley has said, if you've tried to set up a default fund and you can't even do that, then just contact the ATO, throw it on their lap.
Yep,
all right. Sorry, was that?
Oh, yep, that makes sense.
Yes. Let's leave it to them. They created this mess. Okay, so as we wrap up today's session, I want to leave you with one thought. Payday Super is a significant shift, but it doesn't have to be a burden. In all my years in payroll, I've learned that the most successful organisations are those that don't just react to legislation, but they get ahead of it. Today, we've looked at the strategic roadmap, the technologies engine with Riley and Super API, and the compliance integrity with Maria and the APA. So at Deputy, our mission is to simplify this complexity for you. We're committed to ensuring you have the tools and the knowledge to turn these regulatory requirements into a seamless part of your business growth. And great news for you right now, Deputy has a special offer. So Tegan, we can go to next slides. Deputy has a special offer that if you add a Deputy payroll to any plan, you get your first 2 months free. Now, obviously, as always, there are terms and conditions that apply. Read the fine print. But yes, definitely, if you want to learn more, access our Payday Super Hub and practical checklist. Tegan's going to drop that into the chat now, the link to where you can actually find that in the chat now. And if you're new to Deputy and you want to book time with our team, there's going to be a link in the chat right now that Tegan's going to drop in so that you can actually get hold of one of our great consultants and talk to them about becoming a Deputy customer. Now, we are here if you have any questions, but please, as always, there is a little short survey at the end to help us out. Please take a moment to complete the short survey. It really does give us some insight and indications of where we can assist you in the future as well. But that's pretty much what we're looking at if you can fill that in as well. I want to say a huge thank you to my guests today, Riley and Maria. Thank you so much for joining us. You have provided some really great insight and I hope valuable information to our attendees today. And we do look forward to seeing you all at the next Deputy webinar. Those QR codes are on the screen now if you want to grab some of that detail. Otherwise, we will be sending you out an email of the recording and the slides and hopefully some other information that I can slap in there for you as well. So until next time, I look forward to catching you at the next Deputy webinar. But take care, safe payroll, and just get onto those ATO websites as quick as you can to learn exactly what it all entails. So see you.